Most people don't fail because they're not capable. They fail because they're not consistent. They fail because they never made a real decision. They say they want wealth, but their actions scream survival. They say they believe in success, but they worship comfort. They chase freedom, but live like prisoners of distraction. That's why most people stay broke. Broke in money, broke in mindset, broke in spirit. Not because life is unfair, but because they are not prepared for what wealth demands. Wealth is not money. Wealth is a mindset, a decision, a war against average thinking. And the truth most people never face is this: you are either building your future or you're being used to build someone else's. You trade your hours for a paycheck, then spend it numbing the pain of a life you never chose. You scroll, you delay, you wait, and time becomes your enemy because you've given up control. Napoleon Hill said, "There are no limitations to the mind except those we acknowledge." But most people never even question the beliefs they inherited. They were taught that money is evil, that wanting more is selfish, that ambition is arrogance, and so they shrink. They lower their expectations. They dim their own fire. They convince themselves that playing small is noble, that settling is maturity, that suffering is virtue. But listen closely. There is nothing noble about poverty. There is nothing heroic about fear. There is nothing wise about wasting your life because someone else told you success was for those kinds of people. The truth is simple. You will never escape being broke until you stop thinking like someone who is. And that begins in your routines, in your thoughts, in how you spend your time when no one is watching. Most people stay broke because they don't protect their attention. They let the world dictate their focus. They chase 1,000 things and master none. They let other people's priorities override their own, and their life becomes a blur of busyness without purpose. Wealth is born in focus. You cannot create abundance with a scattered mind. You cannot create clarity when you live in reaction. Every great transformation begins with one bold thought: I can. Not someday, not maybe, now. The world you see is only a reflection of the world you've imagined. And most never change their lives because they never change their thoughts. But you are not most people. You are here. You are listening. You are choosing to seed your mind with power instead of fear, clarity instead of confusion, direction instead of doubt. That alone separates you from the masses because the masses react. But leaders respond. They do not beg for circumstances, they create them. You don't need more time, you need more decision. Hill said, "Successful people make decisions quickly and firmly. Failures never make up their minds." So tonight you decide to no longer live beneath your potential, to no longer chase comfort, to no longer speak words of limitation to yourself in secret. Because the secret to life is what you say when no one is watching. It's the thoughts you repeat when you're alone. It's the story you tell yourself before sleep. And if you do not rewrite that story with intention, it will repeat itself forever. This is your moment to rewrite it, to affirm with full conviction, I was born to do something great. I have everything I need to begin. There is nothing outside of me more powerful than what lives inside me. No more hesitation, no more waiting for signs. The signs will follow the steps. The evidence will follow the belief. The world will bend to the force of your will when your will stops bending to the world. Even in rest, you are creating. Even in silence, your thoughts echo into the future. So train your inner voice to speak only strength. I already possess the power. I already possess the mindset. I already possess the ability to direct my life, no matter what has happened in the past. Because the past is a lesson, not a sentence. The past is a stepping stone, not a cage. Nothing that happened before this moment has the right to define what comes next unless you give it permission. And you won't. Tonight you take it all back. Your authority, your belief, your identity. Hill wrote, "You become what you think about." So what are you becoming? Are you becoming stronger in your mind, more disciplined in your actions, more aligned with your purpose? Good. Then you are becoming dangerous to fear, unreachable by doubt, untouchable by mediocrity. The seed is planted, water it with repetition, feed it with emotion, and soon the harvest will arrive. Your thoughts do not sleep. Long after the body rests, the mind keeps building, and what it builds, whether peace or chaos, strength or fear, is entirely determined by what you feed it before the silence. So tonight, as the world fades, you return to the source of power, your mind, your belief, your invisible workshop, where all success is first imagined before it is ever made real. You are not drifting. You are creating. Every thought you hold is shaping your future. Every word you whisper to yourself is a command to the subconscious. And what you consistently command, you will eventually live. This is no fantasy. This is the very philosophy that lifted men from poverty to power. This is the foundation upon which empires were quietly constructed. One idea, one burning desire at a time. Andrew Carnegie believed in it so fully, he entrusted Napoleon Hill to reveal it to the world. And Hill did, not through guesswork, but through decades of study, reflection, and application. The result? A blueprint, not for mere wealth, but for mastery of the self. And mastery begins in stillness. In these quiet hours, when the world retreats, your soul is most awake. Now is the time to remind yourself you are not a product of your past. You are a master of thought, and through the repetition of that truth, it will become law. Close your eyes and hear this. Whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. This is not poetry. This is cause and effect. This is the engine behind invention, behind fortune, behind greatness. What you allow yourself to imagine deeply, vividly, emotionally begins to take shape in the unseen realm. Thomas Edison saw light long before the world did. He conceived it, he believed it, he acted with faith, and the darkness surrendered. You hold that same power right now in this stillness. Your only enemy is doubt. Doubt is the destroyer, the thief. It does not scream, it whispers, it questions, it delays, but you are not the doubter, you are the decider. Let your mind repeat this truth. I will never quit because I was not born to be average. Not one soul Hill ever interviewed, Carnegie, Schwab, Ford, Edison, Rockefeller, reached greatness without first believing in the unseen. They trained their minds to reject limitation. They reprogrammed their subconscious through relentless repetition. They understood that faith is not a feeling, it is a practice. And practice happens now, here in the dark, where there are no distractions, where you are alone with your breath, your heartbeat, and your vision. You are not falling asleep, you are rising from within. There comes a moment in every person's life, quiet or violent, when the mask is ripped off, when the identity you built, the one you protected, the one you believed would shield you from pain, shatters. And in that shattering, something ancient, something eternal stirs from within. We spend our lives building monuments to the ego. We decorate them with titles, status, validation, applause. We stand proudly at the center of our own kingdoms, mistaking control for purpose and visibility for value. But God does not anoint the proud. He does not speak to the voice that shouts over others or the mind that clings to image. He whispers to the broken. He calls from the ruins, because before God can use a man, he must empty him. Not out of cruelty, but out of mercy. Because what you call breaking, God calls becoming. What you call loss, he calls alignment. He is not destroying you. He is destroying what was never truly you. Look at the greats. Look at those who touched eternity. Abraham was asked to sacrifice his only son. Moses was exiled into the wilderness before he ever led a nation. Joseph was betrayed, sold, imprisoned, forgotten before he was ever crowned. Jesus himself was ridiculed, beaten, and crucified before he was glorified. Why? Because to carry divine purpose, you must be emptied of the worldly self. The ego cannot sit on the throne if the soul is to lead. And so God breaks you not to bury you, but to resurrect the version of you that can carry the weight of what he has planned. He crushes your pride so that humility can be born. He silences your plans so that vision can be restored. He removes the audience so that your integrity can be tested in the dark. And that hurts. It hurts to lose what you once idolized. It hurts to be stripped of identity, certainty, and control. It feels like death, because in a way it is the death of self, the death of who you thought you had to be in order to be worthy. But the soul cannot be destroyed. It can only be revealed. You were not created for applause. You were created for impact, and real impact begins in surrender. See, ego fights, ego clings, ego argues, but the soul listens. It yields. It follows the quiet pull toward purpose, and purpose never needs to shout. It knows who sent it. You've been lied to, told that success is about domination, that greatness comes from being seen. But the greatest people who ever lived walked through hell quietly. They were tested in private before they were trusted in public. Ego says, look at me. But the soul says, use me. And when God hears that, when he sees a man or woman drop their need to be the hero, drop their obsession with credit, drop their desperation for validation, he moves, he lifts, he builds through that surrendered vessel. But make no mistake, that surrender doesn't happen in comfort. It doesn't happen at the top of the mountain. It happens in the pit, in the darkness, in the seasons where nothing makes sense and every plan falls apart. You may call it a setback. He calls it the classroom. You may call it failure. He calls it foundation, because what he builds to last. Temporary confidence built on ego will always collapse, but eternal strength built on character, that endures storms. Thomas Edison failed 10,000 times in the dark before the world ever saw light. Carnegie shoveled coal with blistered hands before he ever wrote checks that changed history. Lincoln lost elections, faced heartbreak, battled depression before leading a divided nation. None of these men were strangers to breaking, because greatness doesn't come from what you avoid. It comes from what you survive and what you become in the process. God is not interested in preserving your comfort. He is interested in awakening your soul. He is not interested in leaving you where you are. He is interested in who you were created to become. And if that requires stripping you of everything that props up your ego, so be it. Better to be stripped and rebuilt by heaven than praised and propped up by illusions. You're not being punished. You're being prepared. Prepared for something heavier than your image. Prepared for something holier than your ambition, prepared for a life so rooted in truth that storms don't shake it, failure doesn't break it, and praise doesn't inflate it. But to reach that place, you must let go. Let go of the idea that your worth is measured by what you produce. Let go of the need to control how people see you. Let go of the fear that if you stop striving, you'll stop mattering. Let go so God can move in. You see, your soul has always known the truth. It has always known that the applause fades, that the achievements don't fill the void, that beneath every goal was the desire to be seen, not by the world, but by God. And the moment you stop chasing the world, the moment you fall to your knees, when all you have left is your breath and your belief, that's when the real work begins. Not the work of the hands, but the work of becoming, the soul work, the holy fire that refines, reshapes, rebuilds. And when you rise from that fire, you will not be who you were. You will not want what you wanted. You will not speak how you used to speak, because you will no longer be driven by ego. You will be guided by calling. And that calling won't always make sense. It won't always look impressive, but it will be right. It will burn with conviction. It will stretch your faith and sharpen your focus, because now you walk with God, not just toward him. Now you serve, not to be praised, but because you were chosen. Now you build, not to prove, but because you were prepared. Now you rise, not by force, but by faith. And people won't always understand it. They'll say you've changed. They'll say you've lost your edge. Let them, because they didn't see the night you broke. They didn't hear the silence you sat in. They didn't feel the weight God placed in your spirit. This isn't about them. It never was. It's about alignment. You were never called to climb ladders. You were called to move mountains. You were never called to fit in. You were called to be set apart. And sometimes the only way to be set apart is to be broken apart. So if you find yourself in a season of breaking, if you feel like everything you once leaned on has collapsed, don't run, don't numb, don't hide, lean in. Ask the deeper question, what is God removing so that he can reveal? What is dying so that something truer can be born? Because he's not trying to destroy you, he's trying to awaken you. And when the ego dies, when the mask finally falls, when all that's left is raw truth and real faith, you will be more powerful than you've ever been. Not because you have more, but because you've become more, because you now live from the soul, unshaken, unmoved, unstoppable. That is who God can use. The world doesn't bend for wishes. It bends for will. And most people never realize this because they're too busy begging reality to be easier instead of demanding themselves to be stronger. They wait for life to change when they were born to change it. They wait for signs when they were created to be the sign. But the truth is brutal and liberating all at once. The world does not care what you want. It responds to how you think. Because your thoughts are not small, they are not innocent. Your thoughts are architects, engineers, commanders. They shape how you see, they shape how you move, and eventually they shape what shows up in your life. If your thoughts are confused, your path will be uncertain. If your thoughts are scattered, your results will be diluted. But if your thoughts are focused, unwavering, lit on fire with belief, then the world begins to rearrange itself in your favor. Not because it's easy, not because it's fair, but because you've learned the one law that rules all others: think right and life bends. Napoleon Hill said it like this: whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. Not might, not maybe, can. But most people never get to the believe part. They get stuck in wish. They get buried in someday. They say the right words, but their dominant thought is doubt. They move forward, but only halfway, dragging fear behind them like a shadow. You cannot bend the world with half faith. You cannot speak power and secretly think weakness. You must decide fully, ruthlessly, completely who you are and where you're going. That decision is what separates the legends from the lost. Andrew Carnegie did not stumble into wealth. He designed it. He programmed his mind to serve a vision so definite, so clear, so unshakable that steel itself bent to his will. He did not ask the world if it was possible. He told it what was about to happen. That's how a laborer becomes a king, not by chance, but by choice. The choice to dominate one's own mind. The ones who build empires think differently. They don't waste thought on distraction. They don't negotiate with their fears. They don't rehearse defeat in their minds. They are intentional, obsessive, single-minded. And here's the secret no one tells you. You don't need a perfect plan. You don't need a high IQ, the right background, or permission. You need a made-up mind. Because once the mind is made up, everything else becomes noise. Setbacks become data. Delays become lessons. Failures become fuel. You stop reacting to the world and start reshaping it. That's what Edison did. 10,000 failed attempts weren't failures to him. They were simply 10,000 ways not to make a light bulb. His belief never wavered because he thought from the end. He thought from the place where the bulb was already lit, and he worked backwards from certainty. This is how successful minds operate. They live inside the vision. They occupy it in thought, in speech, in emotion, and the universe eventually catches up to that energy. The man who wins with money wins first in discipline. He doesn't chase dopamine. He builds momentum. He doesn't wait for motivation. He moves from vision. He understands the power of compounding, not just in dollars, but in habits. That's what most people never grasp. Habits are wealth. The right habits executed daily are more powerful than a lottery ticket, a promotion, or a lucky break. Why? Because those things are temporary. But a habit is identity, and identity is forever. If you do what broke people do, you'll stay broke. If you copy their patterns, believe their stories, and adopt their mindset, you will live their fate. Broke people consume more than they create. They spend before they earn. They entertain themselves while they fall behind. They trade time for comfort. They avoid the uncomfortable conversations. They never study money. And worst of all, they believe it's too late. Let me tell you, it's never too late to begin. It's just too painful for most people to admit they've been living wrong. So they defend their excuses. They build an identity around limitation. And the longer they stay there, the harder it is to leave. Because to build wealth, you have to kill the version of yourself that was okay with being broke. You have to destroy your excuses. You have to kill the comfort that kept you stuck. You have to become the kind of person who builds wealth long before you see a dollar in your bank account. That means you think like a creator. You speak with vision. You act like the person you're becoming, not the one you used to be, because the money doesn't come to who you were. It comes to who you decide to become. You must become mentally rich before you become financially rich. You must become internally abundant before the world reflects it back. The man who is truly free, free in thought, free in spirit, free in purpose, he cannot stay broke. It is impossible, because everything he touches is shaped by conviction, precision, and belief. He doesn't drift, he designs, he doesn't wish, he builds.